What does that mean? Hey guys, it's Kevin again, and this is going to be my review for The Missing, Episode 3, The Meaning. If you're wondering why I started my review that way, it's because this episode was probably the craziest yet. We got no answers, more questions, we have more sort of reveals, there's more stuff we found out in this episode, and this was by far the best episode of the season. I love this episode. There were some problems in the beginning, but they did resolve them very quickly, and this show is quickly becoming one of my favorite shows of the year. It really is a fantastic show, so let's just get to it. Basically, we see, basically we go to the past, and we see Tony, Emily is telling Tony that, he'll want it when he comes back. She's frantically rummaging through the hotel room, and it's just been a few days since her son disappeared, and we're then in Chalon de Bois 2006, and she's talking about Oliver's stuffed animal, Fox, and, Julian and, Kamir, I think his name is. I can't remember his name. Kazmir, I think his name is. Let me check his name. I always forget this guy's name. What is his name? Khalid. Julian and Khalid knock at their door and inform the couple that they need to question Tony down at the station. And we fast forward to present day France, where Julian, Tony, and Laurence are we found out that they've successfully reopened it. The case is now reopened, and I was happy for Tony, because this is something that Tony has wanted. This has basically been Tony's mission. He's wanted to reopen this case, and finally, this case has reopened, so I was very happy for Tony because of that. So, the investigation is getting started and everything. They're desperate to keep the story out of the press. They don't want the press into this. They don't want news headlines or anything. They want this to strictly be between them. They don't want anyone else to cover this. So, a forensics team is already checking the basement where they found Oliver's drawing, and Tony looks more colorful. He looks more hopeful even. And I think it's probably because he's getting what he wanted. He's getting this case open, so he's not as depressed. There's hope, which I like, because so far the show hasn't given us much hope. The show has given us a lot of sadness and depression, but now they're finally giving us the sign of hope, which I definitely really like, and I like the slow pacing of it all. So, Laurence gives Julian a new police ID, but he no longer seems reluctant to dive back into detective work, so he's proud of it. So I thought that was definitely very interesting what's going on there. I definitely thought that was interesting. I don't know what to say about that. That was definitely very interesting what was going on there. I mean, I wasn't expecting for him to not be, you know, to be so willing to go back to being in detective mode, because he said that he wanted to retire, and he seemed like he was set on retiring and focusing on his marriage. That's what it seemed like he cared about the most, and now it's like the complete opposite, because he wants to help Tony, and I don't really know why he does, but he does. So we then get to a pretty surprising scene. This was definitely very interesting what was going on here. I didn't really know what to think of this. I mean, this was definitely one of those scenes that was just like, what does that mean? Like, that was definitely very weird. We see Zion, and we see Zion, Detective Zion, is in, Zane. Zane is in prison, and basically it's because resident pesky journalist, we see Malik, he has come to visit him because he wants to get some dirt on Vincent, because he was locked up in the same prison until his recent release, and they want to sort of find out more about Vincent. And I like that we're still following Vincent. We're still covering him. You know, Vincent wasn't a one-episode person. I like that. I thought Vincent was only going to be a one-episode guy, but no, they're going to continue to talk more about him. So Zane is thrilled with his guest, and basically he says that I helped you enough back then, and we know he was passing Malik insider info in the case back in 2006, so it's likely he's in jail for that crime. So that definitely is very interesting. I'm definitely interested in seeing how he got in jail, because somehow he got in jail. I don't know how, but he got in jail somehow. So it's going to be interesting to see what ended up happening to him. We know that we know that Malik has been blackmailing him. So it's going to be interesting to see what Khalid really did. That definitely is going to be interesting. So that was definitely very surprising. So we go back to 2000. We go back to 2006, basically. Oh wait, we know. So basically, if you were wondering why Malik is so intent on trying to help on talking to Vincent, Malik drops the bomb on Khalid that is basically he says he can help me because he knows what happened to Oliver. So this is new evidence, of course. So this is very big what we know. And I was just like, are we seriously gonna find out what happened to him already? And I think sorry guys, I sneezed. I didn't think that was gonna happen, but it seems like that's what's going on here, is that we were going to find out what happened to Oliver, but at the same time, I'm like, I don't really think he actually knows what happened to him, because we're only on episode 3. I don't think they're going to find out what happened to him yet. So, we then go back to 2006, and we see Tony. He's sitting through being questioned about the disappearance of Oliver, and Julian shows Tony the photographs of the bloody man. His name is Greg Halpern. Now, my only complaint with this episode is that the beginning of this episode started off the same way as last week's episode. This guy was being chased, and they got him, and they're trying to find out more about him. And I was kind of thinking that that's how every episode was going to start. And if that's the case, fine, but it eventually is going to get tiring, so I hope the show doesn't keep doing that. I think the show is done with doing that now, but I really hope the show doesn't continue doing that, because I'm not exactly a fan of that. So, basically, we find out that Tony paid this guy a large sum of money after beating him up so badly in 2000, which, if you remember, this all goes back to that conversation that he had with Emily's father. I can't remember his name now. What his name was. What was his name? Oh my god, guys, there's so many characters in the show. I can't remember his name, basically. Let me look for his name. Robert. If you remember, he had the conversation with Robert about the revenge and everything. So this guy could very possibly be the guy that Tony, the guy that kidnapped Oliver. So I thought this was definitely interesting that we brought this up. Basically, he broke several of his ribs and required him to get stitches. We still have no idea why he did this, though, and I like that the show is not revealing really anything to us. So Tony was never much as questioned by the police about the incident, and Emily's father, of course, the lawyer who helped Tony get out of trouble, and we find out what happened, basically. He helped Tony get out of trouble and conceal the incident from Emily, and Tony's bewildered because, he didn't think this had anything to do with the case. He said to Robert, I don't think this has anything to do with the case, I wouldn't worry about it, but it might have to do something with the case. So Tony has to sort of rethink this, and didn't think he'd have to, so I think it definitely is very interesting what's going on there. Now, it turns out the incident with Greg is just one piece of a larger case Julian and Mark are making against Tony. Because Julian asks him, are you a violent man? And he then brings up the time that Oliver went to the hospital for a broken ankle in 2004, and then he cuts to Jason and makes his point clear. There are 9 minutes at the time of Oliver's disappearance that are accounted for in Tony's story. And he asks him, where were you? So that definitely is very interesting. Now, this kind of does make sense that Tony could be a violent man, because he was beating up that guy in the first episode, if you remember, in the present. He was beating him up. So I could definitely see Tony being a violent person. I can definitely see that happening. So Julian brings him Tony's stressful job, and the car trouble he and Emily had that landed them at Hotel La Eden in the first place. And he said, basically he says, a man with a history of violence under stress, was it too much? And Tony seems like he does not know how to answer these questions. He seems pretty speechless. Like, he has no idea how to answer this. So Julian says casually that he accuses Tony. He says, I accuse you, basically. And, he thinks he's serious and everything. Basically, the question is he serious? And he says he is. And he said, if you speak now, and Tony said, he tells Tony, if you speak now, the procure will be easier on you. So I thought that was interesting that he was actually accusing Tony of doing that. So Tony, of course, spirals into a fit of rage. He's obviously pissed at Mark. If you remember, Tony and Mark hate each other in the present, so this is sort of starting to make us, remember why they hate each other so much. And he thought that he was supposed to be helping him and his wife, not incriminating them. And knowing that, that was definitely very interesting that, of course, knowing that they hate each other, we now are starting to see why they hate each other. Probably because I kind of feel like Tony did something to Mark, and that's why he hate him. Because it seems like Tony is a big vengeance for people, definitely. And it's all about vengeance for him. And I think that definitely is very interesting if that's really what's going on there. So now we feel strongly for Tony, because the police are wasting time stringing together unrelated incidents in an attempt to make a contrived case against him, and Tony knows that the real proprietor is still there. And by now we've learned Tony can be emotionally unstable and shady at times, but much more than that. Now we know he's a loving father. We also know he's a loving father desperate to find his son. We don't doubt his innocence for a second. And it doesn't seem that the writers try to make us fall for Julian's implausible theory either. It seems like, sort of like, all of this is relating to, how much he cares about Oliver. So I think it definitely is very interesting what's going on there. So over at the station, we hear from an undercover officer who's infiltrated a local crime ring and thinks he might know something about Oliver's disappearance. He explains to Julian that his crime bosses have been occupied by some mysterious package they are transporting to Thailand. And we have time to connect the dots and become, before we have time to figure out what's going on here, he basically says it's sex trafficking, aka human trafficking, which is disgusting. I don't even want to talk about human trafficking. It's disgusting. The informant tells Julian that the transaction will go down in a nearby warehouse at 3 p.m., and that's just insane. That it's going on at 3 p.m. Like, that's just crazy. And we then see Ian, who, of course, we are still not seeing in the present, and I was very interested in seeing if maybe this episode would tell us why, but we don't know why. He's alone in his house painting and listening to the music. He calls the mayor to talk about the $100,000 euro reward he's putting up for information about the Hughes son, and the mayor tells me he may want to hold off because Tony's being questioned. So while this occurs, something's off about Ian. We can't really tell what it is, it's very subtle, but he almost seems like he's playing a different character here. Ever since we saw him have that conversation with Vincent, he seems to be a lot darker of a character. And I think it's interesting the way they're portraying that, he looks very gray and very, kind of like menacing, so did Ian possibly kidnap Oliver? I don't know. Maybe that's why we're not seeing him in the present, because he's the one that did it. I could see that happening. It kind of makes sense if that happens. I don't know, but he's very creepy now, and I don't know why they're portraying him this way. I mean, the way they're portraying him is a very suspicious way. So, are they going to make him the one that kidnapped Oliver? That could be interesting. So we then see that Ian met Vincent to tell him he paid the witnesses that corroborated Vincent's alibi, thus clearing his name, and this confirms our suspicions that Ian is not the saint he presents himself as. He's not a good guy, really. So maybe Ian's involved in the child sex trafficking ring, maybe? I don't know. Maybe he has child pornography like Vincent does, I don't know. But Emily at this point is hysterical. She's demanding to know why her husband is being detained by the police. She's sobbing and tries an emotional appeal on Mark, asking him to imagine how he would feel like in her shoes. And I agree what she's saying. I mean, he has a son too, so picture how he would feel. I like that Emily tried to get him to relate to that, because it definitely does make sense what she's trying to say there. So we stay with Emily and Mark, but move to present day, where the two, basically Emily tells Mark that Tony has found a new clue in Chaland du Bois, and Mark is already aware of this. And I was happy that he told her. He tells her that he got a call from Tony, and Emily says that she knew, and she's furious at him, obviously, because we can see that she still cares about Tony. She's not someone who's just like, fuck him, I don't care about him. No, she cares about him still. She still has feelings for him, probably because and I kind of feel like I know why she left Tony. She left Tony because it was too stressful for her, and maybe she wanted to kind of calm down a little bit, because we can see that she is very stressed out in the past, so maybe she went with Mark to sort of calm down, and now I think that she's kind of regretting it, because she's not really happy with Mark. So Mark counters with the fact that Tony has called with supposed news many times before, never amounting to anything, so he's basically telling her that this, is no difference. And we then see that the forensics team has finished sweeping the basement where they believe Oliver was held, and the prepared crime scene is clean, and Julian says that he thinks it's perhaps too clean, and we wonder why someone would erase all their prints from the scene, but leave the drawing on the wall behind. Now, that kind of makes sense, because think about it. The only evidence they have is that drawing. The drawing and the scarf. That's all they have. So, what is the drawing exactly? I don't know. Maybe the drawing's like trying to lead them somewhere. Maybe someone drew the drawing. Maybe someone copied it. I don't know. But the next step is to find anyone in the neighborhood who might have seen something, neighbors, the mailman, etc. So we head to a cottage shed in the middle of the woods, where Julian is leading a crew of SWAT team-like cops as they stake out the criminal transaction, and the undercover officer told them about this, but nothing happens. The place is empty, save for surveillance video camera under the shed, and somebody clearly wanted to keep an eye on the stakeout. So this was all a ruse to expose the undercover informant as a mole, and Tony, meanwhile, is getting a drink with Ian, who to his knowledge is still just a kind guy. He doesn't realize that Ian really is. He doesn't realize the, bad guy he really is. So he shares his frustration about how the police are questioning him after letting Vincent go. And in his own self-interest, Ian assures Tony that Vincent is not their guy. He tells him straight out that he's not your guy. And Tony asks him, what we're wondering. Why get involved in the case at all? Because, of course, why would Ian want to get involved in the case? We know why he wants involved, because he wants the money. That's why he's involved, because he wants that money, and he's been promised if he helps him in that case, he's going to get that money. So, obviously, he wants to be involved. So, he kind of tells him that I've been kicked before, I've been laid low, I don't know I don't want that for you, and he said, and we're not convinced, it's pretty much bullshit what he's saying, because we know why he wants because of the money. So he dodges the paparazzi as he heads back to the hotel, and Malik pops up brandishing a newspaper with the headline, and it says Dad's history of violence revealed, and saying Tony should have given him that interview, and he asked for what they first met back at the hotel, but it doesn't matter. He's not pretending to be the nice guy with them anymore. That method didn't work. He's not being the nice guy. He's being straight to them. Now he's resorting to blackmail. He's basically just blackmailing them. So I think that definitely is interesting what's going on there. And it looks like these two are about to get into like a fight. I honestly thought Tony was just going to like knock him out right there. Because of how he was accused, I was pretty convinced he was just going to knock him out, but he didn't. So Tony goes back to his room, and Emily and her parents are there, reeling from the discovery of Tony's violent episode with Greg. And Emily seems more angry with her father for helping Tony cover up the incident than with Tony himself, which I thought was interesting about. So we learned that Emily kissed Greg, setting off an attack by Tony that landed him in the hospital. So this definitely makes me think that he got into a fight with Mark. That definitely is what I think here, because it seems like when Emily kisses other guys, that's really what affects Tony. When something goes on with his family, it really, puts Tony into a big rage, and he seems to have a big ego, definitely. So with that ego, you never know. He could have messed up Mark, and maybe that's why they hate each other. Definitely does make sense if that's what's going on there. So Emily blames Tony for losing Oliver, which I think is interesting. And basically she says if you've been paying attention or some wouldn't be gone. And basically back in the present, Tony and Julian are hosting a small town meeting asking anyone with any knowledge of the case to come forward. So given how much the townspeople despise Tony, it seems odd that they would try to go this route because nobody really likes him and no one would really be nice to him. So Emily has arrived in Chalon Dubois and she walks to the meeting and her and Tony go outside to talk. And she's stuck on the fact that there's no DNA and no solid evidence. And it definitely is a very interesting encounter. I was surprised it wasn't really an awkward encounter between them. I thought that was interesting. So Emily's more impassioned and articulate here than we've ever seen. And it's refreshing to see her, sort of be coming alive, basically, with something until now. She seemed resigned to the situation, emotionally guarded in the present. And even the scenes from the past, she's been very passive, very quiet. She didn't seem like she was really interested in trying to find Oliver. She seemed more interested in, what's going on with Tony and everything. So it seems like now she's very interested in what's going on there, and it's definitely going to be interesting. And she basically tells him that you're looking at shapes in the clouds, you're trying to turn them into things, and she's upset with Tony for taking advantage of her desperation and dragging her back into the case, only to break her heart every time. So now we definitely kind of know why Emily left him for Mark, and I honestly don't want to see this as a flashback. I want to just sort of subtly reveal things. I like that the show subtly reveal things to us because it's something that the show does very, very well. Subtly, revealing things to us. I think definitely is very well done. I definitely really enjoy that the show does that. So we then visit Vincent in London, and he's watching football. He's decked out in his England jersey, and Malik knocks on the door, and Malik used his classic line. He just says, "I just want to talk to you." He says that all the time. Obviously, when he says, "I just want to talk to you," that means I want to interrogate you, basically. So Joe, not Joe. I just read something about a guy named Joe. What am I saying? What am I thinking? Vincent doesn't. Who is Joe? I don't know who Joe is. Vincent doesn't open his door. And it's a little portrayal of his attempts to lock out the past that keeps coming back to haunt him. It seems like he's trying to just, and I kind of understand what he's trying to do. He's trying to change who he was in the past. He's trying to become a better person. He's trying to get the help. We know he was trying to get the help. We know he was trying to get that drug before. So he definitely is trying to get help. So he doesn't really want to be dragged back into the past because he doesn't want to remember it. So it doesn't, trigger something possibly. So I think that definitely is something interesting. And even though he wasn't involved in the disappearance, it is still affecting the life he's trying to lead, basically. So I think it definitely is very well done. Definitely very good storytelling there. So we're back at the police station, and Julian, Tony, and Laurence keep hitting dead ends. No one seems to remember seeing anything out of the ordinary in the neighborhood that day, and Tony sees Laurence with her baby girl, and the look in his face gives away his disbelief. Jealousy, even anger that she's able to enjoy parenthood while Tony still pines for his son after years. And it's if he's reminded that he's the only one in the investigation whose life depends on the outcome. That is interesting. I thought that was an interesting scene because, of course, the thing is everyone else has moved on except for Tony. And I like that the show is still telling us that basically Tony hasn't moved on and everyone else has. Everyone else is like, this case isn't going to work. But now the case is continuing. Tony's still upset because he doesn't want to see people move on with their lives. He wants to see them basically like him and not move on. But Laurence is her family, and for her, the case is really just a job. It's not really about her. It's just a job to her. So his life depends on it, but for Tony, his life depends on it. He is so determined in finding his son. That's what matters to him. So I think that definitely is very interesting. So Julian gets a call from his undercover officer who wants to meet up at the train station later in the day, and we return to 2006 for a pair of scenes that, again, illustrate the difference in how Tony and Emily are handling Oliver's disappearance. Tony breaks into Vincent's apartment looking for evidence on his laptop, apparently still convinced he has something to do with the case. He sliced a deep gash in his hand, breaking the glass, dripping blood all over his kitchen. And Vincent comes home, notices the trickle of blood, an open sliding door, grabs a knife. Tony confronts him, and this was just a very violent scene. And Vincent is referring to his pedophile desires. He says, "I do not let my dreams become reality." And Tony screams him, asking where Oliver is, nearly choking him before coming to his senses and leaving. Emily, though, is at the pool complex where Oliver was lost, clinging to the ground and sobbing. She's hallucinating being reunited with Oliver. Again, Tony's willing to take rash and dangerous actions to charge ahead of the investigation. And again, it really shows the way the show deals with, grief and how they are dealing with it. Tony is very willing to find him. He will do anything to find his son, even if it means beating someone up. That's how much he cares about Oliver. Emily, though, is sort of, emotionally affected by it. It's sort of more, internal for her. Tony's is more external, but hers is more internal. She doesn't want to release those feelings. So I think it definitely is very good story, writing there. I definitely love the way they're writing these two characters because it's not like they're being written the same way. They're not wooden. They are both realistically portrayed. One person could handle something in a more violent way. One person could handle something in a more emotional way. I like the way they're handling that. So Julian goes to the train station to meet with his undercover informant, and he sees him on the other side of the platform and crosses under the tracks to get to him. But in the short time it takes for him to reach the other side, somebody slashed the officer's throat. The criminal being discovered his true identity, and the transaction tip-off from earlier was probably just a test to confirm he was leaking information. So we see someone fleeing, and we see a crazy car chase. This is insane. He fails to catch the man, but we realize it's the first bit of real crime solving. And the thing is in this scene that's very well done is that that Julian is gonna live, but there's a second where you're like, is he gonna be okay? Because the car, literally hits him. He has, a very big, gash across his throat. See, this mark on my eye right here? Picture that was, bleeding out. That's literally, the gash on Julian's, head. So I thought that was definitely very crazy and definitely insane what's going on there. So we then go for the closing scene, which literally had me, completely shocked, and I have no idea what this is trying to say. I literally was just like, what? I have no idea what they're trying to say here. So Tony arrives at the police station where everyone's crowded around a monitor and buzzing about something, and Tony asks what's going on. But Julian doesn't really know if he wants to see this because it's something that might hurt him. And they obtained a video of a football watching party in the living room of a neighbor next door to the house where Oliver was taken. So Julian zooms in on the background. A fuzzy but distinct image of Oliver's at the window of the other house appears, and then a man grabs him. What? what does that mean? Like, that doesn't tell me anything I need to know, and I love that the show is not revealing anything to you, but still, like, what? I have no idea what they're trying to say there. Like, what does that mean? It doesn't make any sense. But overall, guys, this was by far the best episode of the season. I loved it. I loved the way they showed what Tony ended up doing. And my question is, do you think that Greg is the guy that did it? I could definitely see Greg possibly being the one to do it. Did Ian possibly do it? And that's why, you know, we're seeing him in a much more violent, sort of like evil way. Definitely there's something going on there. How did Khalid end up in jail? I'm definitely interested in seeing what's happened there, like how he ended up in prison. That's going to be interesting. What do you think about Emily? It's definitely interesting how Emily handles things and how Tony handles things. I think it definitely is very interesting. Do you think that Tony and Mark hate each other because Tony got into a fight with Mark? I could definitely see that being a possibility. We know that Tony has a very violent track record. We know that he has a big ego and he will beat someone up if he wants to find out time, we'll beat them up. So that's definitely going to be interesting to see what happens there. Who do you think, you know, what is this video? How far does this video take them? That definitely is going to be interesting to see what happens there. I don't know what that really shows. Is that house still alive? I don't know. Is the person that lives in that house still alive? Is that house still there? Did that person move out? That definitely is going to be interesting. That's my review. Hope you guys enjoyed it. And I'm loving this show, guys. I'm loving it. I'm loving the way the show is very subtly revealing things to you. Let me know what you guys saw this episode. I'll see you guys in my next video, which will be my review for probably the Lord of the Rings Two Towers, because I started watching it and I'm gonna finish it. So I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.